This is Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the moment, whatever the sport, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Geoff Mosher is here today as the Eagles officially announced their training camp dates. You can buy season tickets, single game tickets starting tomorrow at 10 a.m. And, of course, the opening of Lincoln Financial Field to see practice. That has been announced as well, August the 1st. And all that Eagles news and notes and more coming up on Football at 4 with Geoff Mosher here on the Sports Bash in just a couple of moments. One thing I did see today, I was reading Albert Breer over at Sports Illustrated, SI.com, and he was talking about the one area where the Eagles, they feel they've had the biggest improvement this offseason. And that was in the secondary. Obviously, they added a lot of people in that secondary, but one of the things that he wrote is one sign of the improvement, meaning that the secondary has improved so much so that the Eagles are toying with moving James Bradberry to safety, a more suitable role for him on the roster, something that they wouldn't be doing if they didn't feel a lot better about the young talent they have at the position. And you take a look at that room. We've talked a lot about it. But I'm really intrigued to find out about contractually. Does it make more sense for the Eagles to just keep Bradberry because of what he's owed and move him to safety? Or is he a guy that they have to try to figure out what to do with? Let's bring Geoff Mosher in from the Inside the Birds podcast, a new edition. You can check that out at Inside the Birds on all podcasting platforms. And, of course, on the YouTube channel, just search Inside the Birds. And there's Geoff Mosher. He joins me now on a Sports Bash Monday Football at 4 edition. What's up, Moshe?
Mike, how you doing, man? What's going on?
All is good, buddy. Training camp announced July 23rd. We are about 1 month away from players reporting to camp, right? I mean, holy mackerel. When that came out today, July 23rd for training camp. We got a little bit of a lull in there, but it feels like the summer hasn't even really kicked off, and now we're already counting down to training camp, buddy.
Hopefully it's a long month, Mike. Hopefully a month feels like a year.
We bring that up because one of the big stories at training camp, and Albert Breer wrote about this today, about the improvement in the Eagles secondary and the cornerback room. And one of the things he wrote was one sign of the improvement in that room as that the Eagles are toying with moving aging corner James Bradberry to safety, a more suitable role for him on the roster. You guys did a whole series on contracts, and I wonder, when you look at Bradberry's contract, does that definitively tell you that he will be here come training camp on this roster?
It does not. You know, I still think in the end, if a deal can be made, and we're talking about at the end of camp, team needs a corner, and it gives the bottom basement to Howie Roseman. We're talking about one of those conditional picks. Maybe it's a 5 that becomes a 4 based on playing time, or if he makes a Pro Bowl or something like that, becomes a 3. Who knows? I think that any kind of deal that would be available for James Bradberry like that, the organization would jump on, unless between in those 4 weeks of camp they see something from James Bradberry that convinces him that he can be a really impactful player at like you said, at either an interior coverage position, a safety position, which is a position he's never played, Mike. So we're talking about real, what sort of term I'm looking for? We're talking about a real uphill battle for James Bradberry in that regard.
Well, we've seen obviously some corners later in their career make that transition. These were elite athlete kind of guys. So, you're talking about some of the best corners that made that switch. In your mind, does anybody say, any scouts or anybody you talk to, look at James Bradberry and say he profiles as that kind of guy that can make that transition from corner to safety? Or is this more that, hey, that room's so crowded, let's just see if it works, and if it doesn't, then we'll have to make a decision?
Yeah, not once has it ever come up to me that James Bradberry, could see some years at safety. He has been a physical player throughout his career, but mostly a zone player, not necessarily a press man type player. We've seen the Rod Woodsons do it, the Charles Woodsons. I also would say there's probably been so many experiments of guys trying to move from corner to safety that didn't work out that we don't focus on, so that when we only focus on the guys who did it and did it well, we make it seem like the door is open for anybody to do it. But I'm sure if you gave me enough time, I could research a bunch of corners who tried to move to safety, and it just did not work out well for them.
Yeah, James Bradberry, we'll see. Another guy you talked about in his contract was Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, and you said on the podcast, when you slice it up, it's a 1-year deal disguised as a 3-year deal, and I guess, if he doesn't play well this year, there's a possibility he could be gone, and I guess that could keep Bradberry, if you watch him this year, hey, can he play some safety in the event that Chauncey Gardner-Johnson gets hurt, as he has the last couple of years? You just keep him around as a depth piece and hope that somewhere along this season he kind of catches on. Is that the scenario that might work the best?
Yeah, I don't know if there's some kind of tie between James Bradberry, let's try him out there in case C.J. Gardner-Johnson doesn't play well or get hurt. But I do believe, I think it's very fair to say, hey, you look at the contract structure where almost all of the guaranteed money in C.J. Gardner-Johnson's deal is year one and only a little bit of year two. And we know the Eagles are not afraid to take a dead money cap that's small. Then it really is a 1-year deal for C.J. So you said, it's important that he plays well to see the end of it. And I would say also stay healthy, because that's really been the biggest issue for him. He didn't stay healthy even last year. He didn't stay healthy the year before that. I mean,
he missed almost the whole season last year.
Yeah, I think he only played 4 games last year. So if I'm not, and that includes the playoffs, I believe. So this is a guy who sort of Avonte Maddox-like, just availability can be a real problem.
Well,
he only played two regular season games last year.
So what's more likely then, that Bradberry, because he's a veteran and the money that he's owed, they keep, or that they keep some of these younger guys that, obviously are younger and cheaper, but you have to take the hit with Bradberry?
Yeah, I mean, I have to think that if younger guys are worth keeping, the Eagles are going to keep them, because you look at what they've done in the secondary. They brought in Quinyon Mitchell, right? They brought in Cooper DeJean. They know that they needed to get younger in that area. They've watched Reed Blankenship develop, and they want to see how he does in year 3. But, there's really not a safety other than Sidney Brown, who's really, coming back from an injury, that I think is going to really wow them. I mean, Tristan McCullum, we're talking about Andre Sam, Mekhi Garner. I mean, these guys would have to be really, really good for me, not for them to make it over Bradberry, but for them to keep Howie Roseman from going to the free agency or going to the trade market to try to upgrade the position.
Geoff Mosher, Football 4, the Inside the Birds podcast. These guys broke down a lot of the different contracts that the Eagles have on the roster right now. One of the things we were talking about, as we now know when training camp starts, some of the things we're looking for at camp, Saquon Barkley, I think it's going to be fascinating to see what Kellen Moore does there. We were breaking down the Zeke Elliott years with Kellen Moore. 300 carries the 1 year, but he caught the ball over 50 times all 3 seasons with Kellen Moore. So I know we laugh all the time about running backs catching the ball in this offense, but 95% offense, brand new. Is this the year the running back catches the ball more out of the backfield? But 300 carries Zeke Elliott had. Do you see Barkley being that kind of guy?
Yeah, I just, I don't really see this offense being that kind of a carbon copy or a clone, because this offense has A.J. Brown, and this offense has Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert, and the quarterback's making, an ungodly amount of money. Obviously they would love to run the ball effectively, and with Saquon Barkley, they have what they believe is a guy who can fit that scheme that they're going to carve up and give them big explosive plays. They want to be an explosive play offense, like most offensive coaches do, most teams do. The Eagles emphasize explosive plays. You hear Nick Sirianni say, our mission is to win the explosive play battle, create more, give up fewer. That's why, we play certain types of zones. That's why we play 2 deep a lot, and that's why we look for players who we think can turn short gains into big gains. And they have those kind of players, and Saquon can be one of them, but I don't see them being sort of what the Cowboys are and were in those Kellen Moore / Mike McCarthy years, which is like almost like a 50-50 marriage of the pass to the run, where one plays off of another.
Yeah, the other guy would be Dallas Goedert. We were kind of looking at the tight end situation in L.A., Dallas, and you would think that usage might go up as well. You're just trying to figure out how they get him more involved because, as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, we always hear about Goddard and the explosion that he can bring to the offense. But do we get to that point that he just is what he is, or can they get more from him in a better offense?
Well, I think they can. I mean, I do think that the best we've seen of Dallas Goedert, which I think you go to 2 years ago, he was on pace for 1,000 yards. He missed a few games, which he typically does a few years. But, 2 years ago, he had 702 yards in 12 games. So that was pretty good. He was averaging like 60 yards a game. So if you, take the 5 games he missed, give him that's 300 extra yards. He's on pace for 1,000.
Yeah.
So but I also think, Mike, that those years that even when he's good, you see what he is. He's a guy who is a good yards after catch, yards after contact receiver, knows how to sit in the soft spots of his own, knows how to turn upfield after the catch, make plays, is a tough player, not necessarily the greatest route runner, struggles at times getting off man press coverage. When you go up against the really good defenses, he can't shake a guy the way Zach Ertz used to be able to with route running and precision. He's just a different kind of tight end that way. But what he gives you is the ability to make big plays happen after the catch.
Yeah, I know Goddard, it's tough because he's between the two receivers on this team, but you wonder if he can, as you mentioned, he was on pace for 1,000 yards with those two guys, if he can be that legit third guy to get 1,000 yards in this offense. I'm really intrigued to see how Moore uses him differently, though. I thought they wasted him essentially last year when he was healthy.
Yeah, well, I mean, the whole offense got messed up there at the end because he was on. I do remember the first 5 games of the year. You're right that we were saying, "Hey, what's going on here?" Because he seemed to just have his timing with Jalen Hurts was off last year for quite a bit. Starting against New England where he had 0 catches, 0 yards, and just 1 target. And then it got a little better the next 2 games, 6 catches for 22, 5 for 41. But we really didn't see a Goddard-like game until week 5. And he had 117 yards against the Rams. And even then, it went back to sort of sporadic play after that. He only had 3 games last year where he had 70 or more yards, which is not the Dallas Goedert that we think of.
No, and of course, the one thing with the Goddard situation is he's the guy. There is nobody else in that room as of June 17th as we have this conversation. I don't know that the backup's in this room yet or at this point.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, there's certainly a lot of names, Grant Calcaterra and Albert O and E.J. Jenkins.
Alberto's an interesting one for the people out there. They got him from Denver last year. He had a little run in Denver for about 4 or 5 weeks and was like a big, physical, fast guy. And I remember that year people like fantasy guys would be like, go out and get this guy. And they gave up on him. The Eagles didn't use him at all last year. But is he legitimately in the mix for this, with this team?
Well, he's a good example, Mike, of when we talk about, sometimes people get excited about players that they heard of that had like a big stretch or, oh, we got this guy. What a steal. And then you're reminded that he was available for a reason, right? So, and I'm not trying to downplay or disparage Alberto. It was an entirely new offense last year, and then it wasn't a very good offense by the second half of the year. So you'd like to think there's a nice clean slate and that he'll have some opportunities to really impress himself with a guy like Kellen Moore, who has made the tight end an important part of his offense where he's been in Dallas and L.A. Maybe not a central part of his offense, but a big enough part where Alberto could impress to get the number 2 job. He obviously has to improve the blocking element of his game if he wants to be a wide tight end, but he can certainly make it as the number 3 tight end, more of a flex pass-catching tight end.
That'll be interesting to see what happens there if the Eagles do make another move between now. Training camp, July 23rd. That was announced today. Also, single-game tickets go on sale tomorrow, 10 a.m. I would have to imagine you got to set your alarm and get in right at 10 a.m. Otherwise, you're pretty much going to be left out. And the open practice at the Link will be August 1st. It's Thursday, August 1st will be the first one. There. We know that. Let me ask you this question in terms of the 2 retirees, Kelsey, Fletcher Cox. Which spot are you more confident that they could fill and not have problems? The Kelsey center spot or the Fletcher defensive tackle spot?
I'm gonna say the Fletcher defensive tackle spot. Not an easy choice by any stretch of the means, but I mean they have a talent in Jalen Carter, who should be able to just take the baton and run with it, as long as he keeps his head on straight. The talent is obviously there, and not to take anything away from the position itself, but it's like go get quarterback, right? I mean, stop run, tackle ball carrier, go get quarterback. When you're talking about replacing Kelsey, it ain't just go block guy in front of you. It's read defense, call out blitz, flip play, double team this guy, move up to that guy. I mean, there's a whole lot more than just go do this one thing or go do these two things. There's a lot to it. And again, I'm not taking anything away. There's a mental part to every single position on the field. I'm just saying center is like the brains of the O-line and the offense. And a guy here did it for 12 years as good as anybody has ever done it. And that's just tough.
Hey, man, I agree that I don't want to say we're taking it for granted, but the whole offensive line in general, the Eagles, like Eagles fans are so used to having all five guys being competent. You might have a spot or two that's not what you're used to, but that's the way most teams operate. They have one or two guys that are good or really good, and then you have some weaknesses. The Eagles have been blessed with five guys for a run here.
Yeah, they've done a great job of drafting and developing talent, bringing in a guy a long time ago like Jason Peters through a trade. They've done an excellent job of prioritizing the offensive line and reaping the benefits of that, while the rest of the league, not the rest, but many teams in the league don't. And unfortunately for them, they reap the benefits of that. But last year, Mike, was the first time in a while, right, when you just had a new right guard, that suddenly things started to look a little bit different. A couple guys getting older, just, in general. And you started to say, maybe this might not be the number one O-line. It might be three, might be four. It's still good. But there were some games like the Jets game where they actually got their asses kicked.
Yeah.
And there were times against the Patriots in the season opener, they got their asses kicked too. So it wasn't often, but now that you've got the new center and the new right guard, I think the Eagles do have to sort of reprove themselves, as at least to be, if they want to be mentioned top three, they got to go out there and get it. It's not going to just be reputation.
We look at the right guard spot. Is it a rite of passage that Tyler Steen wins that job? Certainly not. But I don't know that there is I guess Mekhi Becton would be the most intriguing challenger of that lot as we're counting down to training camp about a month or so away. That one will be one definitely to keep an eye on. Can Mekhi Becton, between now and then, get himself up to speed to be a serviceable NFL right guard?
Yeah, I mean, they still want him to be a little – he's trimmer, but they still got to be a little bit more trim. And then he's got to really be able to lock down the fine parts of that position to really compete there with it.
All right, Geoff Mosher, camp, July 23rd. I don't want to rush you, but enjoy your summer. We'll have plenty more football conversations between now and then. And, of course, we'll see you July 23rd right there ready to go, man. 1 month and less than a week away.
Feels like longer to me, so I'll just stick. That's my story, and I'm going to stick with it.
When that date came out today, I was floored. I couldn't believe. I was like, that's like a month from now.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
All right, brother. We'll talk to you.
See you.
All right, Geoff Mosher, everybody, from the Inside the Birds podcast. And, of course, you can get that on all podcasting platforms. Just search Inside the Birds. And, of course, their YouTube channel has the Football at 4. If you want to miss any of the Football at 4s, you can always check it out on the Inside the Birds YouTube channel.